I am Ethan, 28 years old. 6 months ago, my own brother's fiancée shoved me down a steep flight of concrete stairs, leaving me with a violently dislocated shoulder, a severe traumatic concussion, and a bleeding skull that required immediate emergency surgery. While I was lying in a cold, sterile hospital bed, barely conscious and trying to process the absolute physical and emotional trauma of being attacked by someone who was about to join my family, my parents and my brother were busy rallying around my attacker. My phone buzzed on the metal tray next to my bed. It was a text from my older brother, Julian. It read, "I know what happened. Victoria told me everything. How could you physically attack her out of jealousy? Stay away from us. Victoria is pregnant. You could have killed my baby. We are done." They laughed at my warnings. They alienated me from the family. They painted me as the jealous, unhinged, unstable younger brother to anyone in our hometown who would listen. In the exact moment when I was fighting for my life, my parents looked at the woman who pushed me and offered her comfort and protection. But there was one massive, undeniable secret they did not know. The exclusive, multimillion-dollar real estate development where Julian and Victoria were desperately trying to buy their luxurious dream home, relying on my financial signature as a guarantor. I am the silent majority owner of that entire project. And right now, their loan has been completely denied, their reputation is in shreds, and they are finding out exactly what happens when you cross the line with someone who silently holds all the cards. Before I tell you exactly how this entire empire of lies came crashing down on their heads, please hit that like button if you believe that true justice always finds a way, no matter how long it takes. And please, let me know what city or state you are watching from in the comments below. Your support means everything to me. Now, let's go back to the exact moment my life shattered, and how I rebuilt my broken heart into a weapon of absolute truth. The smell of cheap hospital antiseptic, bleach, and iodine is something you never truly forget. It coats the inside of your nose and sticks to the back of your throat, a constant, suffocating reminder of your own vulnerability. I was lying in room 402 of Portland General Hospital, staring blankly at the flickering fluorescent lights buzzing on the ceiling panels above me. My right shoulder was locked into a heavy, restrictive medical brace, the fiery, sharp pain radiating down to my fingertips with every single heartbeat. 6 thick stitches tracked across my left temple, pulling my skin tight. The emergency room doctor had just left after explaining the severe grade of my concussion, warning me about the lasting dangers of bright lights, sudden movements, and cognitive fatigue. A police officer had come and gone earlier that morning, taking my statement with a look of skeptical pity. When you are a grown man claiming a petite, beautiful woman threw you down a flight of stairs, people tend to look at you sideways. Society has a very specific script for victims, and I did not fit the casting call. I was entirely, utterly alone. The silence in that room was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical beeping of the heart monitor stationed next to my bed. Then my phone vibrated against the metal bedside table. The sound was jarring. I reached for it with my good hand, my fingers trembling slightly from the residual adrenaline and painkillers that were still coursing through my nervous system. When I saw Julian's name flash on the cracked screen, a tiny, foolish part of my heart sparked with desperate hope. I thought my older brother, the guy who used to protect me from neighborhood bullies, the guy who taught me how to throw a baseball in our backyard, the man I had idolized and loved unconditionally for 28 years, was finally reaching out to make sure I was alive. I thought that maybe, just maybe, the reality of my blood on the concrete steps had broken the hypnotic, toxic spell his fiancée had over him. I thought the sight of my empty chair at his dinner table would wake him up. Instead, I opened the text message and read the words that officially, permanently ended our brotherhood. "I know what happened. Victoria told me everything. How could you physically attack her out of jealousy? Stay away from us. Victoria is pregnant. You could have killed my baby. We are done." I stared at the glowing screen until the harsh black letters blurred together into a meaningless string of pixels. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the lie was breathtaking. It knocked the remaining wind out of my lungs. Victoria was not pregnant. She was a master manipulator, a parasite who had attached herself to my family and systematically, meticulously poisoned them against me over the course of 6 agonizing months. And my brother had swallowed the poison willingly, eagerly asking for seconds. He chose the woman who put me in a hospital over the brother who had stood by his side his entire life. He did not call to hear my voice. He did not ask the doctors if my neck was broken. He did not ask if I had permanent brain damage. He just delivered his swift, merciless verdict based entirely on the fabricated tears of a sociopath. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone across the room in a fit of rage. A cold, absolute, terrifying calm washed over me, chilling me down to the very marrow of my bones. The Ethan who cared, the Ethan who constantly tried to save his family from their own ignorance, the Ethan who always played the role of the forgiving younger brother, died in that hospital bed. The man who woke up was someone entirely different. I typed a single word with my left thumb. Done. I hit send. Then I dialed my attorney, Marcus. He picked up on the second ring, his deep voice cutting through the oppressive quiet of the hospital room. Ethan? Good God, man. I got a call from the local police department. I heard what happened at Centennial Park. Are you all right? Tell me you are pressing criminal charges against her. Marcus asked, his tone tight with a mixture of intense professional concern and personal fury. Marcus knew my family dynamic. He knew what I had been enduring. I am fine, Marcus. The police have my formal statement. But that is not why I am calling you right now. I need you to execute a legal withdrawal immediately. I am pulling my name as the financial guarantor on Julian's mortgage application for the Crestview estate property. Do it right now. Contact the banking underwriting department and call Mr. Sterling. And Marcus? Tell Sterling to flag their application for a hard denial. No appeals. Pull the plug on the entire thing. There was a brief, heavy pause on the other end of the line. Marcus knew the exact gravity of what I was asking. Ethan, if I pull this today, they lose the $50,000 earnest money deposit. The developer will blacklist them. They will not be able to buy a storage shed in that zip code, let alone a luxury home. It will trigger a complete financial collapse for their wedding plans. Consider it done, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with absolute, unshakable certainty. They wanted me out of their lives. They told me to stay away. I am simply fulfilling their request to the absolute letter of the law. I am drawing up the paperwork right now, Marcus replied, the shift in his tone turning strictly professional, recognizing the finality in my voice. Rest up, Ethan. We have a war to win, and you hold the nuclear launch keys. I hung up the phone and let my heavy, aching head sink back into the stiff hospital pillow. I closed my eyes, but sleep would not come. To understand how a family gets to the point of literal bloodshed, to understand how a brother can blindly abandon his own sibling to a predator, you have to understand the deeply flawed foundation our family was built upon. My brother did not just choose Victoria out of nowhere. He chose her because she fed into the exact psychological dynamic my parents had carefully cultivated for 3 decades. She figured out the emotional cheat code to my family, and she used it to destroy me. I thought the worst was over when I hit send on that text message. I thought the pain in my shoulder was the hardest thing I would have to endure. I was so incredibly wrong. The real nightmare was just beginning. In my family, Julian was the golden child. It was not a subtle, subconscious preference. It was a blaring neon sign that dictated every single family gathering, every Thanksgiving dinner conversation, and every major financial decision my parents ever made. Julian was the handsome, charismatic, athletic firstborn. He played varsity football, he dated the high school prom queen, and he could do absolutely no wrong in the eyes of Richard and Eleanor, my parents. I remember sitting at the dinner table when Julian received his college acceptance letters. When it came time for his higher education, my parents cheerfully drained their life savings, took out a dangerous second mortgage on our childhood home, and handed over a massive 6-figure college fund to send Julian to a prestigious private university out of state. They bought him a brand new, detailing fresh car as a graduation present so he wouldn't have to take the bus. When my turn came 3 years later, the reality was entirely, brutally different. My father sat me down at the kitchen table, tapped his expensive pen against a yellow legal pad, and told me I needed to look into predatory student loans or perhaps a local trade school because the well was officially dry. I did not complain. I never threw a tantrum. I swallowed my pride and I took out the loans. I worked brutal, backbreaking night shifts doing commercial construction, pouring concrete at 2 in the morning, and spent my daytime hours studying architecture and finance at a local state college. While Julian graduated with honors and stepped smoothly into a comfortable, mid-level management salary with a leased luxury sedan paid for by our father, I was eating ramen noodles and quietly researching the real estate market. I started buying up cheap, distressed, abandoned properties on the edge of town. I fixed them up with my own 2 hands. Over the years, Julian remained the absolute star of the family. My parents never stopped bragging about his corporate promotions, his tailored suits, his expensive country club memberships. I was just Ethan, the quiet younger brother who dabbled in property. They had no idea that my late nights and calloused hands had grown into a massive limited liability company. Through relentless grinding, smart investments, and a keen eye for commercial development, I had built a multi-million-dollar real estate holding portfolio. I partnered with some of the biggest developers in the state. I kept my wealth entirely hidden from my family. I drove a reliable 5-year-old truck. I wore plain clothes. I did not want their money, and I certainly did not want their judgment or their sudden, conditional affection. I just wanted my brother. Despite the blatant, painful favoritism from our parents, Julian and I had a solid bond. He was a good guy underneath the crushing pressure of being the perfect son. Every Sunday morning, without fail, we met at a local diner for black coffee and eggs. We talked about life, sports, and the heavy expectations our parents put on him to maintain his flawless image. I was his sounding board. I grounded him when the corporate world overwhelmed him. Then Victoria walked into his life. Julian brought her to a family barbecue on the 4th of July. From the very moment she stepped onto our parents' backyard patio, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. My survival instincts screamed at me. Victoria was stunning, perfectly polished, wearing a designer sundress, and armed with a radiant smile that never, ever reached her cold, calculating hazel eyes. Within an hour, she had completely charmed my parents. She knew exactly what to say about my mother's dry, overcooked brisket, praising the recipe like it was a closely guarded culinary secret. She listened intently to my father's outdated, boring golf stories, laughing at all the right intervals and stroking his ego with surgical precision. But I saw the mask slip. I was standing by the patio cooler, grabbing a bottle of water, when I overheard Victoria talking to my Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara is the neighborhood gossip, the kind of woman who runs the local HOA meetings like a military dictator and thrives on bringing others down to elevate her own miserable life. "Julian is just so incredibly driven," Victoria said, swirling her glass of expensive white wine, her voice dripping with fake, theatrical sympathy. "It's a shame Ethan doesn't have that same ambition. Julian tells me Ethan is still just fixing up old houses, struggling to get by in the dirt. It must be so hard for Richard and Eleanor to have such a stark contrast in their children. One is a soaring eagle, and the other is just stuck on the ground, dragging them down." Aunt Clara ate it up, nodding vigorously and whispering her enthusiastic agreement. Victoria had masterfully planted a toxic seed of disrespect, isolating me while elevating Julian, all under the guise of an innocent, caring conversation. Over the next few months, the sacred Sunday coffees with Julian slowly stopped. Whenever I texted Julian to hang out, the replies started sounding completely different. They lacked his usual humor and slang. Eventually, I realized Victoria was replying directly from his phone. "Julian is so exhausted from work, Ethan. We're having a quiet couples weekend to recharge. Catch up soon." My brother was being systematically, intentionally isolated from his support system. He stopped attending our monthly poker nights with his oldest childhood friends. He dropped out of the fantasy football league he had run for 5 years. Every time I saw him at a mandatory family dinner, he looked thinner, more exhausted, constantly checking his phone to see if Victoria needed something, jumping at her every subtle command. She corrected his posture at the dinner table. She spoke for him when relatives asked him questions about his career. When I gently brought it up to my parents during a private phone call, expressing my genuine, heartfelt concern for Julian's mental health, my mother snapped at me with a viciousness that left me stunned. "Ethan, please listen to yourself," my mother scoffed, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Julian finally found a woman of high caliber. She pushes him to be better. She is preparing him for a real, successful future. You are just jealous of his success and his beautiful relationship. Do not ruin this for him just because you are lonely and unsuccessful." I was completely shut out. I was losing my brother to a woman who was wrapping him in a psychological straitjacket made of guilt, isolation, and absolute control. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, the pristine foundation of Victoria's perfect life finally cracked wide open. I was sitting in my home office reviewing architectural blueprints when my personal cell phone rang. It was an anonymous call from a blocked number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was a spam caller. "Is this Ethan?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded terrified, her breath hitching nervously in her throat. "Yes, who is this?" I asked, setting down my pen, giving the call my full attention. "My name is Samantha. I used to be Victoria's roommate in Seattle a few years ago. I saw Julian's engagement announcement on Facebook." The woman took a shaky breath, the sound of heavy city traffic in the background indicating she was calling from a public street corner. "Listen to me very carefully, Ethan. You need to save your brother. Get him away from her before it is too late. She destroys people. She will take everything he has, and when he is financially empty, she will destroy his mind and discard him." My blood ran completely cold. "What are you talking about? Who is she?" Samantha's voice dropped to a frantic, paranoid whisper. "We need to meet in person. I have proof, but you cannot tell anyone we are talking. If she finds out I reached out to you, she will come after both of us with everything she has." I had no idea that agreeing to meet this frightened stranger would put a massive, deadly target directly on my back. I met Samantha at a rundown, 24-hour diner on the absolute outskirts of town, miles away from anyone who might recognize either of us. The neon sign buzzed loudly overhead, casting a sickly yellow light over the empty parking lot. She was a bundle of raw, exposed nerves, constantly looking over her shoulder at the entrance door as she slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from me. She did not even order a glass of water. She simply reached into her oversized canvas tote bag and pushed a thick, heavy manila folder across the sticky table. "I should not be doing this," Samantha whispered, wrapping her hands tightly around her own arms as if she were freezing cold. "But I have seen the photos of Julian online. He has that exact same dead, hollow look in his eyes that Liam had right before the end. I cannot let her do to your family what she did to him. I couldn't sleep at night knowing another man was walking into her slaughterhouse." I opened the folder. It was a complete, undeniable nightmare laid out in black and white ink. Bank statements, official court documents, a terrifying restraining order, and printed email correspondence. Samantha explained that Victoria was not a marketing executive with a wealthy family background at all. She was a professional, highly skilled parasite. Her previous fiancé, a man named Liam, was a highly successful software engineer with a spotless record. According to the documents, Victoria had used the exact same psychological playbook on him. She isolated Liam from his family by claiming they were toxic and abusive to her. She convinced him to put her name on his house deed and his lucrative investment portfolios to prove his ultimate commitment. Then, she systematically drained his accounts to fund a lavish lifestyle she portrayed on her curated social media feeds. When Liam finally caught on to the missing funds and tried to legally kick her out of his home, Victoria went on the offensive. She filed a completely fabricated domestic abuse lawsuit against him, claiming she was terrified for her life and that he had held her hostage at gunpoint. She ruined his professional reputation, got him fired from his tech firm within 48 hours, and walked away with a massive six-figure out-of-court settlement just to make her drop the false criminal charges. She even fought for and won custody of his elderly golden retriever, just to inflict maximum emotional pain. "She plays the victim perfectly," Samantha said, her eyes locked onto mine, wide with genuine, unfiltered terror. "She is a mastermind at psychological projection. She will provoke you, she will push you to the absolute edge of your sanity, and the second you raise your voice or react physically in any way, she will cry to the police and everyone around you. Be careful, Ethan. She is not just a gold digger. She actively enjoys the destruction." Armed with this devastating, irrefutable information, I made the biggest mistake of my entire life. I believed that undeniable truth and hard, legal evidence would be enough to break the spell she had over my family. I believed my parents still possessed a shred of logic and protective instinct. I called an emergency family meeting at my parents' house that Sunday afternoon. I knew Julian and Victoria were out of town for the weekend looking at insanely expensive wedding venues, which gave me the perfect, undisturbed window. I walked into my childhood dining room, my heart heavy with dread, and laid the manila folder out on the polished oak table in front of my father and mother. I walked them through the documents piece by piece. I pointed out the fake lawsuits, the drained 401k accounts, the blatant lies about her education, and the fact that the marketing firm she claimed to work for did not even exist in the state registry. My parents stared at the paperwork in absolute silence. For a brief, fleeting second, I saw a flicker of doubt in my father's eyes. But then, the absolute, stubborn refusal to admit they were wrong kicked in. To admit Victoria was a fraud would mean admitting their precious golden child had made a colossal, embarrassing mistake. It would mean admitting I, the lesser son, was right. My mother violently pushed the folder away, sending bank statements and court records fluttering across the hardwood floor like dead leaves. "This is absolutely disgusting, Ethan," she screamed, her face turning a blotchy, furious shade of purple. "I knew you were jealous of your brother, but to hire some sleazy, low-rent private investigator to fabricate garbage about your future sister-in-law? You are sick in the head. You need psychiatric help." "Mom, look at the notary seals. Look at the court stamps. These are real, legally binding documents," I pleaded, dropping to my knees to gather the papers, holding them up to her face so she couldn't look away. "Enough!" my father bellowed, his voice echoing violently off the walls. He slammed his fist down on the table so hard the china coffee cups rattled in their saucers. "Julian makes a fantastic salary. He is buying $1 million home in the Crestview estate. Victoria is a wonderful, classy girl who actually cares about traditional family values. You are trying to sabotage him because you have absolutely nothing to your name. You live in dirt, you work in dirt, and you want to drag him down with you into the mud. If you ever bring this trash into my house again, you are no longer my son." I stood there, staring at the people who gave me life. The sheer, blinding loyalty to their golden child had completely overridden their basic survival instincts. They would rather march joyfully off a financial cliff with a smiling fraud than listen to the ugly truth from the son they deemed inferior. I gathered my papers in silence, zipped them into my leather jacket, and walked out the front door without another word. I was desperate. I was running out of time. I needed an ally. I needed someone who had Julian's ear, someone he might actually listen to without his psychological defenses instantly going up. I turned to Chloe. Chloe was a mutual friend we had known since high school. She was always around, always part of the group, someone who felt like an extended sister to both of us. I met Chloe for a drink at a quiet bar downtown and poured my heart out. I showed her the evidence. I told her I was terrified for Julian's future, and that my parents had completely lost their minds. I told her my final, desperate plan. I was going to take the documents directly to Julian at his corporate office on Wednesday, cornering him during his lunch hour in his private office when Victoria could not intercept him. Chloe looked at the documents, her hands covering her mouth in exaggerated shock. "Oh my God, Ethan, this is insane. You are absolutely right, we have to protect Julian at all costs. I will not say a word to anyone. I promise you, your secret is safe with me. I trusted her. It was a fatal, nearly deadly miscalculation. What I did not know was that Chloe harbored a deep, desperate, pathetic crush on Julian for years. She saw this family crisis as her golden opportunity. Her twisted, selfish logic convinced her that if she proved her ultimate loyalty to Julian and Victoria by exposing my plot, they would keep her in their exclusive inner circle. She thought that by playing the loyal informant, Julian would eventually see her true value and perhaps leave Victoria for her. That very night, Chloe drove straight to Julian's apartment. She sat on their expensive sofa, drank their wine, and handed Victoria every single detail of my plan, every piece of evidence I possessed, and the exact time I planned to ambush Julian. She sold me out for a pat on the head from a psychopath. And by doing so, Chloe handed Victoria the loaded gun she needed to finish me off once and for all. I was walking blindly into a bloodbath, and I did not even know the trap had been meticulously set. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ethan, it is Victoria. Julian told me everything you have been doing behind our backs. I am completely heartbroken, but I want to make peace before this tears the family apart permanently. Meet me at Centennial Park by the stone steps overlooking the river. For PM today. Just us. Please, give me a chance to explain." I screamed of a trap. Every instinct in my body, every primitive alarm bell in my brain told me to ignore the message, to block the number, and to take the documents to Julian's office exactly as planned. But Victoria had brilliantly chosen the location. The stone steps at Centennial Park were notoriously secluded on weekday afternoons, hidden away from the main jogging trails by a thick grove of pine trees. If I did not show up, she would run crying to Julian, showing him the text message as undeniable proof that she tried to be the bigger person and I violently refused to make peace. If I did show up, I was walking blindly into the lion's den. I decided to go. I was tired of the shadows. I was tired of the whispers. I wanted to look the devil in the eyes and let her know I was not backing down, that her cheap intimidation tactics would not work on me. But I was not going unprepared. An hour before the meeting, I received an encrypted email from Marcus, my attorney. Following my strict instructions, he had used his extensive resources to dig even deeper into the leads Samantha provided. The email contained the final, devastating puzzle piece. A piece of information so legally explosive, it guaranteed Victoria was going to prison. Victoria was not just a scam artist. She was a wanted fugitive. Her real name was Valerie Vance. There was an active Class A felony warrant for her arrest in the state of Nevada for wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement of over $500,000. I downloaded the PDF file containing her mugshot directly onto my phone. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer as I parked my truck at the edge of Centennial Park. The autumn air was biting cold, the wind whipping dead, brown leaves across the cracked pavement. I walked down the winding asphalt path toward the river overlook, my hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, my fingers gripping my phone like a lifeline. Victoria was already standing at the top of the steep concrete steps. She was not wearing her usual designer wool coat or perfect, camera-ready makeup. She looked intentionally disheveled, wearing loose gray sweatpants and a baggy, oversized hoodie. It was a bizarre, calculated outfit choice that immediately put me on high alert. As I approached, she did not offer a fake, accommodating smile. The mask was completely gone. Her eyes were dead, black, and completely devoid of human empathy. "You just could not leave well enough alone, could you, Ethan?" she sneered, her voice dropping its usual sweet, musical pitch, revealing a harsh, venomous tone that sounded like gravel grinding together. "Valerie," I said calmly, stopping a few feet away from her and watching her entire body flinch violently at the sound of her real name. "I know everything. I have the outstanding warrant from Nevada. I have the files on Liam. I know about the identity theft. You are done. You are going to pack your bags, walk away from my brother, and never look back. If you do, I will give you a 24-hour head start before I send this entire file to the police department." Victoria let out a dry, barking laugh. It echoed off the stone walls of the overlook. "You really think you have one?" she whispered, taking a slow, predatory step toward me, closing the distance. "Julian hates your guts. Your parents think you are borderline psychotic. Nobody is going to believe the jealous, loser brother over the pregnant, weeping fiancée." "You are not pregnant," I stated flatly, maintaining unblinking eye contact. "Julian thinks I am." She smiled wickedly, her teeth bared. "And that is all that matters. You see, Ethan, in about 2 minutes I am going to call the police. I am going to tell them that you lured me out here, that you demanded I leave Julian, and when I refused to abandon the man I love, you attacked me in a fit of uncontrollable rage." Before my brain could fully process the sheer, terrifying madness of her words, Victoria reached up to her own throat. With deliberate, savage force, she dragged her own fingernails down her neck, carving deep, bloody scratches into her pale skin. She grabbed the collar of her hoodie and ripped the fabric straight down the middle, exposing her collarbone. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled, my eyes widening as I took a rapid step back. "Protecting my inheritance," she hissed. Victoria lunged at me, not to punch me, but to grab the front of my jacket. I instinctively threw my arms up to block her, my hands pushing firmly against her shoulders to keep her away from me. That was exactly what she wanted. She needed my fingerprints on her clothes to corroborate her story. With terrifying speed and calculated leverage, she twisted her body, grabbed my left arm with incredible strength, and used her own body weight to throw herself backward. She dragged me right to the very edge of the concrete stairs. "Goodbye, Ethan." She planted her foot squarely in my chest and shoved with everything she had. I lost my footing. The world tilted upside down. I remember the horrifying, weightless sensation of free-falling, followed immediately by the brutal, bone-crunching impact of the concrete steps against my shoulder. I tumbled violently down the steep, narrow staircase, my body slamming against the jagged edges. My head struck the solid stone with a sickening crack that vibrated through my teeth and sent a shockwave into my brain. I landed at the bottom, crumpled on the pavement, gasping for air that would not fill my paralyzed lungs. Black spots danced violently in my vision. Warm blood poured down the side of my face, blinding my left eye. Through the intense ringing in my ears, I heard Victoria screaming at the top of her lungs, delivering a pitch-perfect, Oscar-worthy performance of absolute terror. "Help! Somebody help me! Please! He attacked me! Help!" I could not move my arm. I could not speak. The pain was completely paralyzing. As the darkness finally pulled me under, shutting down my consciousness, the last thing I saw through my blurred vision was Victoria looking down at me from the top of the stairs. She was not screaming. She was smiling a cold, triumphant smile. The human body has an incredible, almost terrifying capacity to adapt to pain, but the mind is an entirely different battlefield. I spent 4 more agonizing days in that sterile hospital room, staring at the ceiling, mapping out the precise architecture of my revenge. Every time the heavy painkillers wore off, the throbbing in my dislocated shoulder and the sharp, blinding sting of the stitches across my temple served as a physical reminder of my family's ultimate betrayal. I did not just want to stop Julian and Victoria from buying a house. I wanted to dismantle their entire fabricated reality brick by brick. I wanted them to feel the exact same crushing weight of helplessness that I felt as I tumbled down those concrete steps in Centennial Park. On the morning of my discharge, I refused the hospital wheelchair. I signed the release paperwork with my left hand, my signature a jagged, ugly scrawl, and walked out the sliding glass doors into the biting autumn air. Marcus, my attorney, was waiting for me at the curb in his black SUV. He took one look at my bruised, swollen face, the heavy medical sling strapping my right arm to my chest, and the dark circles under my eyes. He did not offer useless pity. He simply unlocked the doors and nodded. We had a war to wage, and the battlefield was a glass-walled boardroom in the downtown financial district. Julian and Victoria had scheduled their final closing appointment for the Crestview Estate property at 10 o'clock that morning at the headquarters of Sterling Real Estate Development. They believed they had won. They firmly believed that I was lying broken in a hospital bed, completely neutralized, and terrified of Victoria's fabricated police report. They thought my text message saying done meant I was surrendering, backing away in defeat to lick my wounds. They had no idea they were walking blindly into a financial guillotine. During the drive to the Sterling building, Marcus briefed me on the exact legal mechanisms we had put into place. Because I was the silent majority owner of the entire Crestview development project, I had absolute, unmitigated unilateral authority over every single contract, every mortgage approval, and every deed transfer. Mr. Sterling, the public face and CEO of the company, answered directly and exclusively to me. We had allowed Julian and Victoria to proceed through the entire agonizing underwriting process. We let them pick out their custom imported Italian marble countertops. We let them select the expensive hardwood flooring. We let them pay the massive, non-refundable $50,000 earnest money deposit. We let them build their entire future on a foundation of sand, just so I could be the one to personally wash it away. We arrived at the Sterling building at 9:45. I bypassed the main lobby reception and took the private executive elevator directly to the top floor. The penthouse boardroom was a masterpiece of intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling Portland skyline. A massive, polished mahogany table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by heavy leather executive chairs. I took my seat at the absolute head of the table, the chairman's chair. I placed my good hand flat against the cool wood. Marcus stood silently by the window, his briefcase resting on a side table. Mr. Sterling, a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a notoriously ruthless business reputation, stood near the double doors, waiting for his cue. At exactly 10 o'clock, the heavy glass doors to the reception area chimed open. Through the frosted glass walls of the boardroom, I could see them arrive. Julian walked in wearing his best tailored navy suit, looking every inch the successful corporate manager he pretended to be. Victoria was clinging tightly to his arm, wearing a pristine white designer dress, her neck strategically covered by a silk scarf to hide the self-inflicted scratches she had used to frame me. And trailing right behind them, practically vibrating with unearned pride, were my parents, Richard and Eleanor. They had come to celebrate their golden child's ultimate triumph. They had come to take photos of Julian signing his life away to a wanted fugitive. They were escorted into a smaller, adjacent conference room by a junior associate. I watched through the internal security monitors on the table as the junior associate offered them sparkling water and expensive coffee. They were laughing. My mother was wiping away a tear of joy. Julian kissed Victoria on the forehead. The sheer arrogance radiating from the screen made the blood pound fiercely against the stitches in my temple. Mr. Sterling looked at me, raising one thick eyebrow. I gave him a single, slow nod. The trap was officially sprung. Mr. Sterling picked up the thick stack of final closing documents and walked into their conference room. I turned up the audio feed on the monitor. The moment Sterling entered, Julian stood up, offering a firm, confident handshake. "Mr. Sterling, it is an absolute honor," Julian said, his voice dripping with practiced corporate charm. "We are incredibly excited to finalize everything today. Victoria has already started picking out the landscaping arrangements for the backyard." Sterling did not shake his hand. He did not smile. He simply placed the thick file folder down on the glass table and looked at Julian with cold, calculated professional detachment. "Mr. Vance," Sterling began, using our family's last name with a tone that sounded more like an insult than a greeting. "There will be no closing today. Furthermore, there will be no closing tomorrow or ever. I am here to formally inform you that your mortgage application for the Crestview Estate property has been unequivocally denied by our underwriting department. Your contract is hereby null and void, effective immediately." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that follows a bomb drop. I watched the arrogant, triumphant smiles melt off my parents' faces. Victoria's grip on her expensive leather handbag tightened so fiercely, her knuckles turned completely white. Julian blinked rapidly, confusion warring with rising anger. I am sorry, there must be some kind of massive administrative error. I was pre-approved weeks ago. My salary is more than sufficient. We wired the earnest money deposit. I have a guarantor on the file. You had a guarantor? Sterling corrected him, his voice completely devoid of emotion. Your guarantor officially and legally withdrew his signature and all associated financial backing 72 hours ago. Without that backing, your debt-to-income ratio combined with the recent inquiries on your credit report makes you an unacceptable risk to this development firm. We do not do business with high-risk liabilities. Julian's face flushed a deep, violent shade of crimson. He turned to Victoria, then to my father. Ethan, that vindictive, jealous little coward. He pulled his name because he is throwing a tantrum over a family dispute. He is trying to ruin my life. Julian turned back to Sterling, slamming his hands flat on the table. Listen to me, Mr. Sterling. You cannot cancel this contract over a petty family squabble. I have the funds. I demand to speak to whoever is actually in charge of this decision. I want to speak to the owner of this development right now. I will not be treated like some second-class citizen. Sterling looked at Julian, a ghost of a mocking smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Are you absolutely certain you want to speak to the majority owner, Julian? Yes, right this second, Julian demanded, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Very well, Sterling said smoothly. He stepped back and gestured toward the heavy double doors connecting their room to the main executive boardroom where I was sitting. He has been expecting you. Sterling pushed the double doors open wide. The lighting in the main boardroom was dramatic, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. I sat completely still in the chairman's chair, the heavy medical sling a stark white contrast against my dark shirt. The bruises on my face were vivid, ugly shades of purple and yellow. Julian stormed through the doors, ready to yell at some faceless corporate billionaire. Victoria marched right behind him, ready to play the charming, distressed victim. My parents followed, their faces masks of righteous indignation. They all froze simultaneously. It was as if they had walked directly into an invisible brick wall. Julian stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in absolute, uncomprehending shock. He looked at me sitting in the massive leather chair, then looked at the sleek engraved nameplate resting on the desk that read, Ethan Vance, founder and majority shareholder. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. His brain simply could not process the data his eyes were sending it. Ethan, Julian whispered, the anger instantly draining from his voice, replaced by a hollow, breathless confusion. What are you doing sitting there? What is this? I leaned forward slowly, resting my good forearm on the polished mahogany. I looked directly into my brother's eyes. I wanted him to see the complete absence of the younger brother he used to know. I am denying your loan, Julian, I said, my voice steady, cold, and echoing with absolute authority. I own Crestview. I own this building. I own the ground you are currently standing on. And I am telling you to your face that you will never live in my neighborhood. You will never see a single dime of your deposit returned. You told me to stay away from your life. I am simply cleaning house. My mother let out a strangled gasp, bringing her hand up to cover her mouth. My father's face drained of all color, turning an ashen, sickly gray. The golden child narrative they had worshipped for 30 years was instantly, violently shattered. The son they had dismissed as a struggling failure holding them back was the very architect of the empire they were begging to enter. Victoria, however, did not freeze in shock. Her survival instincts kicked in immediately. She stepped out from behind Julian, her eyes narrowing into dangerous, calculating slits. She realized the immense scale of the wealth she had just accidentally alienated, and she tried to pivot with terrifying speed. Ethan, Victoria said, forcing her voice into a soft, pleading, sickly sweet tone. Please let us be reasonable adults about this. Family fights happen, Emotions run high. What happened at the park was a tragic accident. A terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this. We are family. You are going to be an uncle. We should not let business destroy our bond. I looked at the woman who had shoved me down a flight of concrete stairs, the woman who had planned to leave me bleeding in a park to secure her fake inheritance. We are not family, Valerie, I said loudly, dropping her real name into the quiet room like a live grenade. Victoria physically recoiled, stumbling backward a half-step. The color vanished from her cheeks. I know exactly who you are, Valerie Vance, I continued, my voice rising in volume, commanding the entire room. I know about the active felony warrants in Nevada. I know about the wire fraud. I know about the identity theft. I know exactly what you did to Liam. I know about the massive lawsuit. I have every single document, every bank statement, and every court record locked in a safe right behind me. Julian spun around to look at her, his face a portrait of utter devastation. Valerie? What is he talking about? Who is Liam? Victoria's mask finally, completely shattered. The sweet, loving fiancé vanished, replaced by a cornered, vicious animal. She looked wildly around the room, realizing the exits were blocked by reality. But before she could formulate another lie, before she could spin another web of manipulation, the glass doors to the reception area chimed open once again. This time, it was not a junior associate offering expensive coffee. It was Detective Hayes from the Portland Police Department, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Now, let me tell you exactly how the police closed the net around her, and how my parents learned the true, devastating cost of their blind loyalty. Detective Hayes stepped into the expansive boardroom, the heavy utility belt at her waist clicking sharply with every deliberate step. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted from corporate tension to genuine legal terror. My parents instinctively backed away, pressing themselves against the glass wall as if trying to merge with the architecture. Julian stood frozen, suspended in a state of paralyzing shock between the woman he thought he loved and the brother he had discarded. Valerie Vance, also operating under the alias Victoria Collins, Detective Hayes announced, her voice projecting the undeniable authority of the law. You are under arrest for outstanding felony warrants issued by the state of Nevada. You are also being charged locally with aggravated assault, filing a false police report, and attempted felony fraud. Victoria's eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route that did not exist. She grabbed Julian's arm, digging her manicured fingernails into his expensive suit jacket. Julian, do something. Tell them they are lying. He is setting me up. Ethan fabricated all of this because he is obsessed with me. Julian looked down at her hands gripping his arm, then slowly looked up at her face. The illusion was breaking, but he was still desperately clinging to the fragments. Detective, there has to be a mistake. She is my fiancée. She is pregnant with my child. My brother attacked her at the park a few days ago. She is the victim here. Detective Hayes did not blink. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a digital tablet. Mr. Vance, your fiancée is not the victim, and unless she is a medical miracle, she is certainly not pregnant. As for the incident at Centennial Park, we received a crucial piece of evidence yesterday evening. A jogger named Sarah was running on the upper trail. She heard shouting and pulled out her phone to record what she thought was a domestic dispute. She captured the entire incident from a clear, elevated angle. Hayes tapped the screen and placed the tablet flat on the mahogany table. The video played. The audio was slightly muffled by the wind, but the visuals were absolutely undeniable. There was Victoria, ripping her own clothing, violently scratching her own neck. There was Victoria, grabbing my jacket, leveraging her body weight, and forcefully shoving me backward down the steep concrete stairs. The video ended with the horrifying sound of my body impacting the stone, followed immediately by Victoria checking her nails before initiating her fake, theatrical screams for help. Julian stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open, his breathing shallow and rapid. The reality of what he had aligned himself with finally crashed down on him with the force of a freight train. He slowly reached over and peeled Victoria's fingers off his arm, stepping away from her as if she were made of toxic waste. "You pushed him?" Julian whispered, his voice cracking, staring at her with profound horror. "He told me the truth and you pushed him down the stairs. You could have killed my brother." Victoria realized the performance was over. The tears instantly dried up. Her posture straightened, and the charming, vulnerable facade dropped completely, revealing the cold, calculating sociopath hiding underneath. "Oh, grow up, Julian," Victoria spat, her voice dripping with absolute venom and disgust. "You are a pathetic, weak-minded little boy playing at being a successful man. You were the easiest mark I have ever had. All I had to do was tell you how brilliant you were and stroke your fragile ego, and you handed me the keys to your life. You are a spineless coward who needs his mommy and daddy to fight his battles. I never loved you. I despised touching you." The absolute cruelty of her words hit Julian like a physical blow to the chest. He staggered back, leaning heavily against the conference table for support. My mother let out a loud, wailing sob, burying her face in her hands. The two uniformed officers stepped forward, swiftly grabbing Victoria's arms and locking heavy steel handcuffs around her wrists. The sharp, metallic click echoed loudly in the silent room. "You have the right to remain silent." The officer began reading the Miranda rights as they forcibly marched her toward the double doors. Victoria twisted her head back, shooting one final, purely hateful glare in my direction. I did not flinch. I stared right back at her, my face a mask of cold indifference, until the elevator doors closed behind her, removing her toxic presence from my life forever. The immediate silence left in her wake was suffocating. Julian sank slowly into one of the leather executive chairs, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, devastating sobs. The golden child was broken, his perfect life exposed as a humiliating, carefully orchestrated illusion. But the nightmare was not entirely over. There was one final, catastrophic truth that needed to be dragged into the light. I looked at Marcus and gave him a subtle nod. It was time to execute the final phase of the legal trap. Marcus opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of financial documents, sliding them across the smooth mahogany table toward my father. Richard stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly. "What is this, Ethan? Hasn't there been enough destruction for one day? Please, just let us go home." "You don't have a home to go to anymore, Richard," I said coldly, intentionally refusing to call him Dad. My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide with sudden primal panic. "What are you talking about?" Marcus adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "During the underwriting investigation for Julian's mortgage, our firm discovered massive, glaring irregularities in your personal financial statements. As the listed co-signers on Julian's initial application, your assets were subjected to a deep forensic audit. We found the wire transfers." My mother stopped crying, her face turning chalk white. She grabbed my father's arm. "Wire transfers?" Julian asked, looking up, his eyes red and swollen. "Mom? Dad? What wire transfers?" I looked directly at my parents, feeling absolutely no pity for the cornered expressions on their faces. Victoria did not just drain her previous victims. She saw an untapped goldmine in your blind, obsessive devotion to Julian's success. 3 months ago, Victoria convinced you both that she had insider access to a highly lucrative, restricted international investment portfolio. She told you it would guarantee generational wealth for Julian's future children. I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. She convinced you to quietly take out a massive second mortgage on the family home. She convinced you to liquidate your entire retirement 401k accounts without consulting a financial advisor. You wired over $400,000 directly into an offshore account controlled exclusively by Valerie Vance. An account that was emptied and closed the very next day. Your money is gone. It is never coming back. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Julian leaped to his feet, screaming at my parents, asking how they could be so incredibly stupid, how they could hide something so massive from him. My father clutched his chest, struggling to breathe as a full-blown panic attack set in. My mother fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically, grasping at the expensive fabric of my trousers. "Ethan, please!" my mother wailed, tears streaming down her heavily made-up face. "You have to help us. We are going to lose the house. We are going to be homeless. You own this company, you have millions. Please, you have to bail us out. We are your family." I looked down at the woman who had birthed me, the woman who had looked me in the eye just weeks ago and told me I was a jealous, worthless failure. I looked at my father, who had threatened to disown me for telling the truth. I gently but firmly stepped back, pulling my leg away from her grasp. "When I came to you with evidence, you threw it in my face," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. "When I was lying in a hospital bed with a severe concussion and a dislocated shoulder, you did not visit me. You comforted the woman who pushed me. You made your choice, Eleanor. You chose the illusion of perfection over the reality of your actual son. You funded a criminal to maintain your social status. I am not a bank, and I am certainly not your safety net." I turned to Marcus. "Call security. Have them escorted out of the building. If they refuse to leave, press trespassing charges." I did not wait to watch them be dragged out by the guards. I turned my back on the screaming, crying wreckage of my biological family, walked out through the private executive exit, and took the elevator down to the underground parking garage. As the elevator descended, I felt a massive, invisible weight lift off my chest. The toxic loyalty that had anchored me to their dysfunction was finally severed. The storm was over, and I had survived the wreckage. Time does not heal all wounds, but it does grant you the distance required to inspect the scars without bleeding all over again. A full calendar year passed since the catastrophic confrontation in the boardroom of the Sterling building. In those 12 months, my life underwent a massive, profound transformation, built entirely on the boundaries I had brutally established that day. My physical recovery was an exhausting, grueling journey. I spent 3 mornings a week in intensive physical therapy, slowly retraining the muscles and torn ligaments in my right shoulder. The concussion left me with lingering migraines and a hypersensitivity to bright lights that lasted for months, requiring me to wear tinted glasses during important meetings. But the physical pain was secondary to the mental rehabilitation. I started seeing Dr. Aris, a specialized trauma therapist. Dr. Aris helped me dismantle the heavy, suffocating programming installed by my parents. He helped me realize that being the responsible, forgiving younger brother was not a virtue. It was a trauma response designed to survive in a deeply narcissistic family structure. I learned to stop setting myself on fire just to keep other people warm. With my mind clear and my toxic family ties completely severed, my professional life exploded with unprecedented success. Without the constant, draining emotional vampire of my family's drama pulling my focus, I directed all my aggressive energy into my business. My real estate holding company acquired 3 new major commercial properties in the downtown district. I stopped hiding my success. I bought a modern, beautifully designed house in the hills overlooking the city, and I finally traded in my old, battered truck for a sleek, understated sports car. I was no longer apologizing for my ambition. While I was building an empire, the people who had tried to destroy me were collapsing under the weight of their own terrible decisions. The financial ruin I predicted for my parents came to pass with absolute ruthless efficiency. Without the massive influx of cash they had wired to Victoria's offshore accounts, they could not maintain the predatory interest payments on the second mortgage they had foolishly taken out. Within 6 months, the bank foreclosed on my childhood home. The house where I grew up, the house where they hosted their arrogant Thanksgiving dinners and bragged about Julian's fake successes, was auctioned off to the highest bidder. Richard and Eleanor were forced to sell off their expensive furniture, my father's prized golf clubs, and my mother's jewelry just to afford the security deposit on a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of the city. Aunt Clara, the neighborhood gossip who had helped Victoria isolate me, completely abandoned them the moment their social status vanished. They became pariahs in their own community. Julian's descent was even more spectacular. The sheer humiliation of being publicly conned, combined with the loss of the Crestview estate and the realization that his entire identity was a manufactured lie, broke him completely. He started drinking heavily to numb the shame. His performance at his corporate management job plummeted, and within 3 months he was quietly terminated. The golden child, the soaring eagle of the Vance family, was suddenly unemployed, broke, and drowning in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. I kept tabs on them through Marcus, maintaining a strict, impenetrable wall of no contact. I ignored the desperate voicemails my mother left on holidays. I ignored the lengthy, rambling emails my father sent demanding financial assistance. I was resolute. Then, on a cold, relentlessly rainy Tuesday evening in November, my security gate buzzer rang. I looked at the live feed from the camera mounted on the stone pillar outside my property. Standing there, completely soaked to the bone, wearing a faded jacket and holding a cheap umbrella, was Julian. He looked 10 years older. The arrogant corporate swagger was entirely gone, replaced by the hunched posture of a man who had been beaten down by reality. I could have ignored the buzzer. I could have called the police and had him removed for trespassing. But the years of therapy with Dr. Eris had given me a different kind of strength. The strength to face the past without letting it control me. I pressed the button to open the iron gates and stood on my covered front porch, waiting for him to walk up the long driveway. Julian stopped at the bottom of my porch stairs. He did not try to come up. He looked at my house, looked at my car parked in the driveway, and then finally looked up at me. His eyes were clear, devoid of the glassy haze of alcohol. "I have been sober for 90 days, Ethan," Julian said, his voice hoarse, competing with the sound of the rain hitting the pavement. "I got a job working on a commercial landscaping crew. I am pulling weeds and planting trees. It pays minimum wage." I stood with my hands in my pockets, leaning against the doorframe. "Why are you here, Julian?" Julian swallowed hard, rain dripping from his nose. "I didn't come to ask for money. I swear to God. Mom and Dad tried to pressure me into coming here to beg you to pay their rent, but I refused. I came here because I need to look you in the eye and apologize. Not just for Victoria, but for everything." He took a deep, shivering breath. "I was a coward, Ethan. My entire life, I let Mom and Dad put me on a pedestal because it was easier than actually earning respect. I knew they treated you like garbage, and I never defended you because I was terrified of losing my status as the perfect son. Victoria saw that insecurity, and she weaponized it. When she pushed you down those stairs, and I sent you that text message, I have to live with that shame every single day for the rest of my life. I am so incredibly sorry. You are twice the man I will ever be." I looked at my older brother. The anger that had burned like a furnace inside me for a year slowly began to cool. I didn't feel hatred anymore. I just felt a profound, heavy sadness for the time we had lost. "I accept your apology, Julian," I said quietly. "But an apology does not erase the past." "I know it doesn't," Julian nodded, looking down at his worn-out work boots. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect to be invited inside. I just needed you to know that I know exactly what I threw away. I threw away the only person in the world who actually loved me for who I was, not what I achieved." He turned around and started walking back down the driveway into the pouring rain. "Julian," I called out. He stopped and looked back. "I am not going to give you money. I am not going to bail Mom and Dad out of their apartment. But if you maintain your sobriety, and if you keep working hard, you can meet me at the downtown diner next Sunday at 8 in the morning. Black coffee and eggs. You pay for your own meal." A tiny, fragile smile broke across Julian's exhausted face. "I will be there, Ethan. I promise." That Sunday marked the beginning of a new, strictly defined relationship. We did not instantly become best friends again. The trust was shattered, and it would take years of consistent, proven behavior to rebuild even a fraction of it. But we established a boundary, a healthy, realistic boundary based on mutual accountability, not blind, toxic family loyalty. My parents were furious when they found out Julian was speaking to me, and I still refused to open my checkbook for them. They accused him of betraying them. Julian simply hung up the phone. He was finally learning how to walk away from the poison. As for Victoria or Valerie Vance, the justice system was far less forgiving than I was. Her criminal trial concluded a month later. Because of the overwhelming mountain of evidence, the financial documents Samantha provided, the testimony from Liam, the undeniable security camera footage from the jogger in Centennial Park, and the active warrants from Nevada, her high-priced public defender could not spin a defense. Victoria tried to play the victim in the courtroom, weeping on the stand and claiming a history of severe mental illness, but the judge saw right through the theatrical performance. She was convicted on multiple counts of Class A felony wire fraud, identity theft, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the concrete stairs. The judge handed down a massive sentence, 15 years in a federal penitentiary, with no possibility of early parole, followed by an aggressive mandate for financial restitution to her victims. The day the bailiff placed her in handcuffs to transport her to prison, I was sitting in the back row of the gallery. She turned and locked eyes with me one last time. There was no screaming, no fake tears, just the cold, dead stare of a predator who had finally been caught in a trap of her own making. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply stood up, turned my back on her, and walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight. I never thought about her again. This entire, harrowing journey fundamentally changed the core of my existence. I used to believe that family was an unbreakable bond, a sacred contract written in blood that required you to endure endless abuse just to maintain a seat at the dinner table. I was wrong. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty, respect, and mutual protection make you family. If the people who share your DNA are actively destroying your mental health, sabotaging your success, or choosing to believe a comforting lie over your painful truth, you have zero obligation to stay in the burning building with them. Walking away from toxic parents or siblings does not make you a bad person. It makes you a survivor. I had to be pushed to the absolute brink of death, bleeding on the cold concrete of Centennial Park, to finally realize my own worth. I had to lose my brother to realize I didn't need him to validate my existence. I had to let my parents go bankrupt to realize their financial approval was completely meaningless. I built an empire in the shadows, but I learned how to live in the light. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, painful line in the sand and walk away from the people who were supposed to love you the most, simply to protect your own sanity and survival? Share your story in the comments below. The comments section is a safe space, and reading your experiences helps me, and thousands of others, realize that we are never truly alone in this fight. Do not forget to like this video to help the algorithm push it to someone who might desperately need to hear this message today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Thank you for listening, and remember, your peace is worth protecting at any cost.